Hello everyone, my name is Chris Kaptein and I want to welcome you to this tutorial for Digital Juice. Today we're going to be taking a look at using Digital Juice's new product, Drag and Drop, and we're going to be using it to create this really nice, shiny, reflective 3D logo reveal. This will work with any vector logo or text and is completely built with After Effects built-in tools and of course Drag and Drop. So let's get right into it. So the first thing you'll need is your logo. This is a logo I created a while ago for a local video production house, but you can use any logo as long as it's in vector format, so Illustrator or EPS. In After Effects CS6, to the delight of MoGraph artists everywhere, Adobe introduced real 3D extrusions to vector shape layers. And this will be the base of this effect, but we're really going to spice it up with drag and drop. Here I am in the juicer, and this is always my favorite part of any project, getting to choose the elements I'm going to use. I feel like a kid in a candy store whenever I open up the juicer. If you're not familiar with how the juicer works, I highly recommend you check out the tutorial series, Getting Started with Drag and Drop. But basically, I'm going to go through these elements and choose the ones I want. And there's so many great ones here. Really, any of these would work with this project. The great thing is you could do this 100 different times with different elements and get a totally different result every time. So I'm going to go into this bokeh elements and I'm going to choose one for the background. And this is just so fun. Literally any of these would work. And truth be told, if you want to do it the fun way, just choose as many of them as you want and see which one works best in your shot. Just play around a little. When I was first doing this project, I think I rendered about 30 of the elements from the different collections and just had a lot of fun playing around. But for now, I'll just grab this Subtle Spell option 1. And I'm also going to grab this Enchanted Allure and Shades of Passion. I'm also going to choose some light leaks to use as overlays. And again, don't be afraid to play and don't be afraid to layer lots of different elements on top of each other to get different looks. But the ones that I used in the example was this Dormant Magic and Gentle Sheen. Lastly, I'm going to grab some light sweeps to use as transitions, and I think this is my favorite collection out of the whole drag and drop library. They're just so cool. Look at this disco haze transition. But for my project, I only used two. I used this Disc Reflections, and There Is Still Magic. All right, once I have them all in my batch panel, I can go into the settings and set up my desired format and save location and just hit render all. All right, here we are in After Effects and you can see I've already imported my Digital Juice elements and my logo. And the first thing I'm going to do is make a new comp with my background, and I've chosen this Subtle Spell option 1 for my background. So I'll drag it into the Make New Comp button. And here it is, and I'll just change the name of the comp to something more relevant. And I'll drop my logo file down here, and I'm going to turn off my background layer for now. All right, so I'm going to set up my logo as a 3D extruded object, but first I need to convert it to an After Effects shape layer. And to do that, I'll click on the layer, and I'll go up and choose Layer, Create Shapes from Vector Layer. And this will make a new shape layer with the paths from my vector file. And you can see that it actually made a copy and it turned off my Illustrator file, and I can actually delete that layer. I don't even need it anymore. So I'm going to make this a 3D layer by clicking in this little box. And now you can see that it moves around in 3D space, but it's not extruded yet. To enable the extrusions, we have to go to the Composition settings and click on the Advanced tab. And under Renderer, we're going to change it from Classic 3D to Ray Traced 3D and hit OK. So now when we look at the options, we can see these new options, Geometry options and Material options. So we'll start with the Geometry options. Actually, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new 3D camera. So I'll go Layer, New Camera, and I'll choose this 20mm preset. We want the logo to look big and impressive, so a wider angle is going to do better. I'll position the camera in a spot where we can see a nice perspective of the logo. All right, going back into the geometry settings for our logo, I'm going to set the extrusion depth to 10, and I'll set the bevel style to angular, and I'll set the bevel depth down to 1. Alright, we can't really see the shape of the text very well. It just looks like a big white blob. We need to add some reflections to give it some definition. Under the material options, we can see there's some parameters for reflections. And I'm just going to set this reflection intensity up to 80%. But now we have a problem that it doesn't really have anything to reflect. It's just reflecting itself a little bit in the corners and the edges here. But other than that, it's just blackness. So we need to set up an environment map. We need to give it something to reflect. So I'm going to reset my camera to its default position. And I'm going to use this enchanted allure for my reflection map. So I'll drag it into the comp, and I'm going to turn off my logo for a sec, and I'll turn on my background again. I actually want this reflection to be a similar color to the background layer, as if it was just one big world that was being reflected into the text. So I'm first going to add the tint effect to remove all the color, and then I will add the curves effect. And I'm just going to darken it down overall a bit. And I'll go into the red channel and really drop that down. I'll go into the blue channel and push that up a bit. And I'll go into the green channel and I'll tweak that a little bit as well. And I'm just going to tweak it until I get something close. And that's pretty good. So I'll reset this layer and I'll turn off my background layer. And I'm going to click on the layer and choose Layer, Environment Layer. And what this does is it wraps the layer into the inside of a giant sphere to create this environment. And if I move the camera around, you can kind of see what I mean. But this environment function is actually meant for spherical images like HDRI images, which are very high resolution and are seamless. They're not really meant for just wrapping a flat image around. And if I turn our logo back on, you can kind of see what I mean. You can see that we have some reflections, but we also get a seam right in our reflection. So I'm just going to rotate this layer 180 degrees so that the seam is behind the text. Obviously, we don't want to see this layer, so I'll twirl the properties. And here where it says appears in reflections, I'll just click on it once and it will change to only. So it disappears and it only shows up in the reflections. Now I know the reflections don't look like much from here, but if I move the camera back in and do a RAM preview, and you can see what's happening, we have these really amazing animated reflections all over our text, and you can really see it in the bevels and the extrusions here, and it just brings the whole thing to life. Now I just wanted to take a minute here because I know some of you are like me and you haven't upgraded your video card in a while, and the After Effects ray tracer just turns your computer into molasses. It's so slow. Or maybe you're just looking for an option that renders a bit faster than the After Effects ray trace renderer. I want to show you a quick way to cheat the reflection effect using the classic 3D renderer. And this is a technique based on a pretty old tutorial by Maltanen on creating a skybox or a sky dome. Basically, you take the layer that you want to use as your reflection and you add the CC sphere effect to it. And I'll just turn off the logo here. And then in the render option, you choose to render the inside. Then you crank the radius way up. And then you just remove the light. And you bump up the ambient shading to 100 just to get rid of all that shading and just get that flat light back. Now you can see that the After Effects camera is not linked to the CC sphere effect. We have to do that with expressions. So in the CC sphere effect, I'm going to alt-click on this X rotation property to enable the expressions and type this expression. Look at, open bracket, this comp, active camera, position, comma, position, close bracket, open square bracket, 0, close square bracket. And I'm going to copy this expression onto the Y rotation property as well, but I'm going to change the last number to 1. And I'll do the same thing for the Z rotation, and I'll change the last number to 2. So now you can see the camera is linked to the sphere and we have basically the same thing as the environment. But we have a problem again with the seam. So I'm just going to add 180 to the Y rotation expression just to rotate it an extra 180 degrees and get rid of that seam. And now all we need to do is set the track matte of this reflection to the logo layer, and voila, we have a fake reflection. Obviously, there's some limitations here. You don't get the extrusion or the bevel. You could always fake the extrusion using the old multiple copies spaced out in Z-space trick, but obviously you can't rotate it too much or you start to see the edge of the individual layers. So there's some limitations to it, but if you're looking for a faster solution than the ray trace renderer, if you don't have time for it, if you're in a pinch, at least you have an alternative. Anyway, that was just a little side note. Back to the main event. Speaking of the ray trace render, you might notice that the quality is sometimes a little fuzzy, even at full resolution. And you can really see this when you turn on depth of field on your camera. So this part here is supposed to be nice and blurry, but it comes across as low quality, messy, gross. And the place that you fix it is in the composition settings. Under advanced, click the options for the renderer, and here where it says ray tracing quality, you need to raise this number, especially if you're going to be using depth of field. The minimum that I found that was passable quality for depth of field was 6, but you'll see that the render time jumps like crazy. I just cut out 3 minutes of me waiting for this one frame to render. So I would recommend when you're working, turn off depth of field and set your quality back down to 2 and keep your resolution settings at like 1/3 or 1/4. And just remember to turn all that back on before you do your final export. All right, let's create our camera moves. This is another area where you can sort of have creative freedom to do whatever you want, have as many camera moves as you want. I just built 3 simple moves, 50 frames each. So for the first move, let's keep the camera nice and close, maybe turn it on an angle, and I'll set a position keyframe. And after 50 frames, I'm going to move the camera just slightly. Remember, we want this to look big and impressive, so the move has to be as slow as possible. I'll just orbit the camera ever so slightly, and I'll play that back. And that looks pretty good. We have some nice reflections in the text there. So at frame 49, I'll end that camera layer by hitting Alt and close square bracket. And then on frame 50, I'm going to add a new camera layer with the 20mm preset again, and I'm going to hit open square bracket to have it begin there on frame 50. And now if we change our camera to active camera, it will automatically switch as it plays back. So this second camera, I'll move below the logo looking up at it, and I'll set a position keyframe, and again I'm going to make a really tiny move that lasts 50 frames. And then I will end the layer again by hitting Alt, close square brackets. And then on frame 100, I'm going to add my third camera, 20mm again, and hit open square bracket to start it at 100. So for the last camera, we actually want to see the logo like this. So I'm going to leave the camera here. And this will be the end position. The start position, I'll make a little closer, so I'll truck in a bit. And this last keyframe, I'm going to make it an easy ease keyframe by clicking on it and hitting F9, so it'll gradually slow down as it comes to its resting point. Now as we get here, I want the logo to turn white so that we can see it better, and I also want it to flatten out so it just looks like the original logo file again. So I'm going to animate the extrusion depth starting from frame 100 and ending at about 160. So I'll put that down to 0. And I'll also animate the reflection intensity down from 80 all the way down to 0. Maybe we'll keep it at about 20%. And we'll ease those keyframes as well. And we'll turn our background back on, and this is looking really good. All right, now we'll add the light leak overlays. And again, I can't stress this enough. Have fun and try lots of different combinations. Don't be afraid to layer multiple elements as well and get a different look. For this first shot, I'm going to use this dormant magic clip. So we'll place it above the logo layer, and we'll change the blend mode to screen. So that looks pretty good, but I want to add a glow to this text just to make it pop a bit more. I can't actually add the glow effect to a 3D shape layer because it doesn't do anything. I have to put it on an adjustment layer. So I'll add a new adjustment layer, and I'll move it below the light leaks, and I'll add the glow effect. And I'll have to turn the threshold way up. I just want to keep it subtle. I'll change the colors to A and B colors. I really just want these white hotspots to glow a bit. So I'll increase the radius as well. And I'll also add a curves adjustment to this layer, and I'll just increase the contrast a bit. And obviously this is also affecting the background, so I don't want to get too crazy. And that looks pretty good. It just brings a little bit more life to that text. All right, I'll end this light leaks at 50 frames, and I'm going to grab another clip for the second shot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click to bring it up in the layer viewer, and I'm going to find a nice frame that can kind of work as a transition frame. And I'll hit this in button, and then I'll hit this overlay edit button to drop it in my timeline, and I'll just put it in the right order here. I'll change the blend mode to screen, and I'll end the shot at frame 100, and that shot is done. For the last shot, I'm going to choose another bokeh element, this Shades of Passion. So I'll just drop that in there and set the blend mode to screen, and that shot is done. All right, last thing we're going to do is we're going to add some transition elements. I only have 2 cuts here that need transitions. I'm going to color code my layers here just so I can keep track of what's going on. I'm going to change my overlay layers to yellow, and I'll change my bokeh layers to orange. All right, so for the first transition, I'm going to use this There Is Still Magic. So I'll put it in the timeline, and for these transitions, I like to bring them up in my layer viewer by double clicking on it and looking for a frame that would work as a good transition point. This one would work. It's pretty well all white. So I'm just going to add a marker on that frame by hitting the asterisk key on the number pad. And you can see that the marker shows up here. So all I have to do is line up this marker with my cut point, and I'll set the transfer mode to screen and just do a RAM preview, and that looks good to me. I'll do the same thing for this next transition where I used disk reflections. I'll double click to open it up in the layer viewer. Look for a good transition point. This frame looks good. I'll hit the asterisk key to set a marker, and I'll line up that marker with the cut point. Set the transfer mode to screen, and we're done. Now you could add some more color correction to this if you want, but I think it looks pretty good already. I think we can render this out. We just have to remember to go back and turn on all those settings again. I'm going to turn on motion blur for my logo layer. And I'm going to go into my first camera here, and I'll turn on the depth of field, and I'll turn it on for my second camera as well. I'll just leave it off for the third camera though, it's not really needed. I'll go back into my render settings, and I'll crank that number back up to 6, and I'll go ahead and render this out. All right, that's it. Once again, I encourage you guys to really play with this product. That's really what Drag and Drop really is. It's a big toy box for editors and compositors and motion graphic artists. So try some different looks, some different color schemes, different camera moves, and just have fun. I just want to say thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment. Please like and share this video. Once again, my name is Chris Kaptein for Digital Juice. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.